When people first visit Korea, they're often stunned by the sheer number of apartment complexes that dominate the skyline. It's particularly striking when you consider that neighboring Japan has very few apartment complexes. So why is Korea so different? As of 2023, Korea has over 10 million apartment units. In fact, population surveys show that 62.3% of the entire population lives in apartments. Why do people love these human beehives so much? It's so ingrained in Korean culture that even Blackpink made a song called Apart. If you're curious about one of the world's most unique housing markets, this is something you need to see. Let's explore how Korea transformed from a nation of single-family homes into an apartment republic, creating countless millionaires and continuing to generate investment opportunities even today. You might think it's inevitable, given Korea's small territory and large population. Well, look at Japan, Singapore, and Taiwan. They all have higher population densities than Korea. The apartment-covered landscape is a uniquely Korean phenomenon. It's particularly overwhelming when you look at Seoul, the capital city. Today's content draws from two books written by Korean professors, Creating Valuable Apartments and The Birth of Metropolis Seoul. Just 50 years ago, in the 1970s, apartments were practically non-existent in Korea. Back then, statistics show there were only 33,372 apartment units. Koreans of 50 years ago lived in normal houses, just like everyone else. That's a 300-fold increase in 50 years. 95.3% of the population lived in single-family homes. 1964 marked the emergence of the first privately available apartment complex, known as the Mapo Apartments. Scholars consider this the beginning of South Korea's apartment era. It was an ambitious project pushed by President Park Chung-hee's government as part of the 5-year economic development plan. The president's inaugural speech reveals the reasoning. Until now, our nation's lifestyle has been extremely uneconomical and irrational. We must break away from old-fashioned and feudal ways of living and adopt modern collective living styles to achieve advancement in our national life and culture. The government presented apartments as the ideal future housing model. Ironically, while the phrase collective living style sounds like something from communist rhetoric, Koreans who despise communism still admire President Park. Quite a paradox. However, at that time, people didn't like apartments. Traditional Korean culture involved storing food at home. They used large earthenware jars to store kimchi for long periods, a traditional Korean refrigeration system. The lower floors of apartments didn't get much sunlight, and there wasn't enough space for these storage jars. Early apartments used radiator steam heating instead of the current floor heating system called ondol, making it difficult for Koreans who preferred warm floors to adapt. In fact, after completion, less than 1/10 of Mapo apartments were occupied. Initially, apartments were meant for the poor. The government introduced apartments as a housing solution for ordinary citizens in 1968. This was triggered by Seoul's population surge and the proliferation of shanty houses between 1966 and 1968. To the government, this system was attractive as it could accommodate many people in a small space. The government announced plans for large-scale apartment construction to resettle displaced persons. The announced construction scale was about 2,000 units, and Jumwa Apartment, one of Korea's first public housing projects, was built under this plan. At 8 a.m. on April 8, 1903, the Wow apartment in Mapo-gu, one of the citizen apartments, collapsed. Corruption leading to poor construction was revealed as the cause. The accident claimed 33 lives, and citizen apartment construction was completely halted afterward. After cheap, hastily built apartments collapsed, the government changed its approach to supply quality apartments to the middle class. They began building large-scale middle-class apartments in what was then the empty fields of Gangnam, Seoul. The government incentivized Gangnam's development through various benefits. Moreover, Relocating schools to Gangnam intensified Korea's already fierce education fever. The government secured 12,000 hectares of land for apartments in Gangnam, about 1/4 of New York City's total area. The large apartment complexes in Banpo, Gangnam, and Jamsil were built during this period. While it started as government-led, private construction companies began building apartments in the 1970s. The government supported private housing construction with tax money and even provided roads and facilities. In other words, they invested all national resources into apartment construction. Anyone who could get cement and steel could make money in the housing business. This repeated pattern established the equation: apartments equals money in Korea. The famous Hyundai apartment in Apgujeong, known for housing the wealthy, was also built in 1975. The Chun Du-hwan regime in the 1980s maintained the large-scale apartment supply policy. These leaders, who gained power through military coup rather than election, tried to appease public sentiment by fulfilling middle-class dreams of home ownership. This resulted in a plan to build 5 million housing units over 10 years. The goal was to increase the housing supply rate from 77% to 90% nationwide between 1981 and 1991. Under this policy, a substantial number of apartments began to be built in the metropolitan area. In areas like Yangcheongu and Nowon-gu, you can see entire regions covered in apartments, literally becoming apartment villages. The construction boom continued rapidly in Gangnam as well. Despite building many apartments, housing prices rose relentlessly during the economic boom that began in the late 1980s, and supply struggled to keep up with demand. With demand exceeding supply despite massive construction, prices started to rise. In the 1990s, Korea's Roh Tae-woo administration introduced a large-scale supply measure centered on building 2 million housing units for market stability. Government-led planned new cities began development in Bundang, Ilsan, Yeongdong, and Pyeongchang. Small cities filled with nothing but apartments began emerging around Seoul's outskirts. The government speed campaign built 2 million housing units in just 3 years. From just 30,000 apartment units in 1970, the number skyrocketed under the government's large-scale housing supply policy. 370,000 units in 1980, 820,000 in 1909, 985, and a whopping 1.6 million by 1990. Eventually, public perception of apartments began to change. According to the Statistics Office, in 1970, only 3.9% of citizens preferred apartments. Even apartment residents preferred single-family homes back then. But by 1993, both single-family home and apartment residents preferred apartments. A Seoul National University professor analyzed this shift in apartment perception. Apartments offered many advantages in terms of convenience compared to other housing types. Unlike traditional homes with outdoor kitchens and toilets, apartments featured modern kitchens and flush toilets. The shift from extended to nuclear families made these advantages more appealing. Above all, people began seeing apartments not just as homes, but as commodities with high exchange value. After decades of being supplied at below market prices, many people made profits from apartment investments, creating the myth that apartments mean money. For these conditioned people, apartments became both family residences and investment assets for wealth accumulation. Scholars analyze that the authoritarian government could consolidate the middle class in large apartment complexes by supplying price-controlled apartments en masse, gaining political support by offering both home ownership and asset appreciation. Let's wrap up today's content. The housing crisis of the late 1980s led to Korea's first-generation new city developments, Bundang, Ilsan, and Pyeongchang. These satellite cities became blueprints for future urban development, demonstrating that entire cities could be built around apartments. Today, Korean apartments are more than just living spaces. They're cornerstones of household assets. Seoul's average apartment prices have risen over 800% since the early 1990s, outperforming most other investments. Recent data shows about 70% of Korean household assets are tied to real estate, with apartments being the most preferred investment vehicle. Korea's apartment phenomenon continues to evolve. Recent developments focus on smart home technology, sustainability, and community facilities, becoming increasingly attractive to younger generations. Looking back, the history of Korean apartments mirrors their transformation from living spaces to investment assets. Just as human desires are endless, perhaps Korea's apartments will continue to multiply endlessly? If you liked the video, please subscribe and like it. Thank you.